Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime, and it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? A drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude. Welcome. Today, I'm speaking with Sherri DeWalt. She is the content creator and leader of Rookery Resources, a ministry equipping women to build supportive community and grow faith in Christ on the foundation of friendship. As an attorney and former public defender, she advocates for justice, supports ministries that serve underserved, and seeks to be a peacemaker. Her heartbeat is for her family and friends. Knowing and making Christ known is her purpose and her passion. Welcome, Sherri. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited because, I always try to tell the listeners how I know or how I've come to be connected with the people that are sharing their stories. And Sherri and I met years ago at one pivotal moment when I normally couldn't do kind of small group type things. We sat across the table from one another in her home, had a discussion, connected on social media, and really only knew each other that way for years. And then my church and her church did a women's retreat together, and I was a speaker. I met Sherri later after the event at a mutual friend's home to have a meal afterwards and kind of celebrate. And we got talking and made plans to get together at her home again. And we've just become really fast friends. I love her heart. I love everything that she's doing. And it's a God connection.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love you too.
So when we got talking about some of the things that God's doing in her life, the ministries he has for her, I said, you really should come on the podcast. I'd love to share your story, and I'd love to highlight what you're doing because I think it's just so wonderful. And honestly, organic, real community is something that's big on my heart. I know in this particular season, I'm taking care of my parents. I can't really open my home up in the way that I long to, but hospitality is also one of the things that God uses a lot in me. So I can't wait to kind of do some of the things that Sherri's doing. And she's making a resource so that other people can do what she's doing. And I just can't wait to get into that part of the story. Now, we do things a little differently over here. And we start at the beginning so that people can see the thread of God working in our lives, because sometimes we forget that he's always there. And I just love seeing that beautiful thread. So Sherri, would you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Yes, I was born and raised in Philadelphia. My parents were married for 12 years before children came along, and I have one older sister. So I grew up in the 70s, but I think because my parents were a little bit older, our home had more of a 50s vibe, and not in the sense of, a traditional homemaker by any stretch. My mom actually never even went food shopping in her whole life, I don't think. She
Wow.
wasn't a big cook or anything, but she was very glamorous and just they had so many friends and they were always hosting parties and just wonderful, amazing childhood and amazing parents.
Wow. I was picturing Ricky and Lucy Ricardo when you were saying that, like the times where they would have the fancy parties at the club, right? That's really cool. So what are some of your memories? Like if you could say like a memory that just pops in your head from childhood, what would that be?
My mom was just always making everything special. Holidays were really special, always included a lot of friends and family, singing and playing the piano. Everyone would gather. Um, my parents' friends were just interesting and always interested in me and my sister. My dad was a Philadelphia fireman, and my parents had a group of friends. They called themselves the Mountain Gang because I think they had originally vacationed in the Pocono Mountains, but it really just became their closest friends. And I came to know many of their children, and they just would always vacation together and have parties. And I just remember almost uniformly, all of them were just larger than life, telling funny stories. And so it's just really special.
Yeah, and it's really funny, and this is how God works, right? He puts in us things that we're attracted to or things that bring us joy, things that make us feel kind of at home, quote unquote. And that's what he uses in our ministries, our purposes, and our callings. And so you said the word special, gather, you talked about
Mm.
connection, hospitality, community, and that's all what you're doing for Jesus. It's pretty cool.
It's amazing because I never even thought of that or saw it that way.
That's why starting at the beginning is such a gift. Oftentimes, we get really blessed by our own story when we see
Mm.
that God is always working and always moving, and it's pretty cool. So, I also love having a pen in here, and I make these little notes as I notice because I think it's important that sometimes we have other people help us see our stories because I think we miss things sometimes. I know in my own story, I've missed a bunch of things until I started journaling and writing and becoming somebody who processed that through sharing all the time. That's when I started getting all the good stuff.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Now, you didn't grow up in a Christian home like you said, but you told me during our pre-recording call, going to the church down the street. So, what was that experience like for you?
Yes, at a very young age, I started to attend Sunday school and church and VBSs at a small Baptist church just 2 blocks away. Two doors down, my best friend Linda lived with her family, and very different family from mine. Her dad was an accountant during the week, and on the weekends, he took care of the facility at our church, quiet man. And she's my best friend still to this day. We're so very close, and just
Wow.
started to go down there and was really embraced by all of the adults there and all of the various ministries. As a early teenager, I did they used to call it Pioneer Girls. I think they call it Explorer Girls now,
Hmm.
but it was just really special. I just felt very loved. I came to know Christ as a young child, and I just believe that He had a hand of protection over my childhood, and that was an important part of it.
Yeah, I just love how God peppers in those special people that get us to know about him and his kingdom, right? If it
Mhm.
doesn't happen in our family, even though there are very good things in your family, things that he was going to use in your ministry, he gets us to know him through
Mm.
friends, sometimes grandparents, these other special people. I also loved that when you talked about going to that church, you felt embraced and there was connection. So that was being reinforced. That thing that you loved was also happening there.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now you told me that being social, was really important to your family. Was that something that came easily to you?
No, I was a very quiet and shy child. My mom would tell me stories that as a young child, I would even hide behind her when my father was home. My father worked a lot. He
Mhm.
had two jobs when I was young, and so he wasn't around a lot. And I was shy even in front of him. So
Yeah.
I think that I am naturally a quiet, bookish person, but because it was so important to my mom's family is originally from the South, and I always attribute a little bit of that hospitality and
Mhm.
social skills to people from the South, and so that was very important to her. And so, from an early age, it was just drilled into me to always greet her friends, to always smile at them and whatnot.
Yeah.
And but I actually see it as a gift that I learned those things at a young age. I think those things are important as we, navigate life. And if they don't come naturally to us,
Mhm.
I'm grateful that my mom taught me.
Yeah, I think that's like a place to stick a pin, right? You were being prepared for the things that you were going to do, right?
Hmm.
So maybe that wasn't how you felt originally, but you were being prepared to become an attorney, to be able to do this ministry and outreach. You know, you need to be able to go up and talk to people to have some kind of group of friends in your neighborhood that you're reaching for
Yes.
Christ, right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. You did share a memory with me, and I also was shy. You know, in Christ, I am very outgoing, but before I was very shy and quiet. I was always telling stories. They were written down or to people that I felt safe with, like family. But yeah, it's funny how God changes us to be able to do what He has for us to do. You shared a memory with me from when you were in fourth grade. You told me that your teacher went out of the room and something happened. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Could you share that story?
Yes. My teacher was not in the room. I don't know where she was, but just the class started to talk and people were fooling around and whatnot. And so a lunchroom lady kept coming in and telling us to be quiet.
Hmm.
And then at one point she came in and she just singled me out. And she said, you're always talking. You're not paying attention to what I'm telling you.
Hmm.
And I just got so hysterical just because I was, singled out and I was reprimanded for something that, I don't even think I was really part of that. And I
Yeah.
just started crying and I couldn't calm down. And the teacher came back and I remember being in the hallway at the water fountain and they were trying to splash my face with water and just get me to calm down. Um, and when I went home and told my mother, she was absolutely furious. And she went up to the school the next day and she met with the principal. And, the stories become kind of like family legend because over and over through my life, she would repeat exactly what she told the principal. And,
Hmm.
how she told us that she went there and she was prepared to listen. But when she got there, she just said her piece and,
Uh-huh.
marched out. And I honestly think that that changed me. I think that the example of her just having my back
Hmm.
was just so powerful. And she was always like that. She always told my sister and I, always stick up for yourself. And
Hmm.
I remember her saying, if you're at a makeup counter and they're not treating you right because you're a child or you're young, that's not right, and you need to be treated well. And so I thought that was interesting. I had another funny story as an adult with my mother. I had an epic girls trip with my mother, my niece, and my best friend, my
Hmm.
childhood friend that I mentioned earlier. We went all through Europe, and there was one point we were in London and we were in kind of like a bad neighborhood. And interestingly, my mom at the time was in a wheelchair, not because she just had like a sprained ankle or something. So on this trip, we bought her a wheelchair, and that just added to all of these crazy memories and stuff. Us like pushing her around, and she even said that I wasn't allowed to push her because I wasn't careful enough. And it was an epic trip, like really one
Uh-huh.
of the best trips of my life. But anyway, at one point, we were in this uh, not such a great neighborhood and it was at night, and I looked across and through a glass door window that was quite large I could see these two men fighting.
Yeah.
And I said, Mom, those men are fighting, what should I do? And she goes, go get them. So without even thinking, I just went over and I started banging on the door and I said, I see you. And
Hmm.
the man was kind of startled and he looked over and he's like, that's my brother. And I said, I see you, knock it off. And we went back to the hotel room and called the police and just let them know that, something had happened there or whatnot. And I just think it's just so funny because I think that she did instill in me just this
Hmm.
sense that you don't let something bad happen and let it go without trying to stop it.
Yeah, and advocacy is such a big part of your life. I love how you noticed that that affected you. I see your mom not only being your advocate, but also seeking justice. And it's kind of interesting you went to law school. And I see you growing in confidence because of her actions. And oftentimes, as a mother, we end up doing things just because we know it's right. Like I also was that kind of mom. I just recently was with my daughter and some friends, and we were telling stories of all of the teachers that I went and kind of talked to in front of the principal. And one of which was so old, she actually retired. She was like realized she shouldn't be teaching anymore. And how I stood up for her because like, there's that, people call it mama bear, but
Hmm.
it's this parental uh, love that you just really want to protect. And it's really neat because as I grew to become a Christian, I realized God has that fierce love for me too, and for you and for all of us. And so he's always advocating and seeking justice and protecting us. And so I love how that part of your personality began to see real growth because of just being a child of the mother God gave you.
Yes.
It's pretty cool. Now, you mentioned to me that your mom always looked perfect. And I wanted to know, do you know why that was important to her? Because I think typically if somebody, does something all the time, there's a reason.
Yes, my mom was beautiful. She was teeny tiny, and I'm not. Um, she always coordinated all of her clothing. Her hair was always perfect, and I think that she really received so much attention through the years for looking the way that she did. I, I remember being in New York City, and my mom was well into her 70s, maybe even her early 80s, and people would still stop her, even to take a picture with her, because
Hmm.
she was just so darling. And
Oh.
there was just something otherworldly about her. She was just so special. And like I said, she always looked so great. And I do see that as, the opposite side of that coin was, I think that it was difficult for her to age because then as her looks, started to go away and stuff, she always wanted to, I think that was, really difficult for her. So,
Hmm.
um, but you said, maybe why was she like that? And I had remembered she told me a story once when she was in her 20s. She worked as a teller in a bank, and she said that she was in the elevator and this man walked in and he said, "You would be a very beautiful girl if it weren't for that scar on your face." And
Whoa.
the interesting thing is, as close as I was with my mother, how much time I spent with her, I never even really knew too much about that scar or, what had caused it or whatnot. But I knew that my parents had always said that shortly after that, she had that scar removed, and there was
Hmm.
really no evidence of it. I had never noticed it my whole life, but so I think that maybe that woundedness, probably resulted in her being
Yeah.
extra attentive to her appearance.
Yeah, and that's a really good lesson for all of us to just take a moment and realize negative words stick.
Hmm.
I heard this story. I thought it was so great about this father who was reprimanding his son, who got very angry at his mom and started spewing some really nasty, negative things. And so as his punishment, the dad took him out on a very hot day to the fence all the way at the end of their ground and had him nail nails into every one of the fence pieces all the way across, right? And so the son came back in and he was, oh, it was so horrible. It really thought that, the dad thought that that was going to sink in. And just a few days later, he did it again. So the dad took him outside this time with the hammer and gave him the claw end and said, now I want you to take every one of those nails out. He did, and they went back to the very beginning. He said, everything that comes out of your mouth like that towards someone is like a nail being hammered into them. And even if you say you're sorry and you take them out, you leave a
Mm-hmm.
hole. You leave a
Wow.
hole. And I was like, whoa. So that's what that reminds me of.
Wow, that's beautiful and true.
Yeah. And I'm sorry that was the basis. Do you think she ever got over it?
Gosh, I don't I think she may have, but I think that then just with years of being so mindful of her appearance, and then I think that can come a little bit of your identity and what people expect of you. And,
Hmm.
so I think that it probably kind of evolved then into maybe being that concerned about it, just because of years of getting the attention for it and
Yeah.
it being expected of her.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a shame when we don't 100% know our full identity as child of God, and that
Mhm.
God will bring with him everything else that we need. From that place, really, when you know you're his child and you know he's your father, everything else kind of falls away.
Yes, yes. Another really interesting story about my mom is that she got baptized when she was 83 years old. And
Wow.
yeah, my entire life, I told you went down to this small church and I've always been involved in different churches. And she was always interested and always wanted to come with me whenever she could. When I went to a women's retreat or anything like that, she always loved to come. Yet she never in her lifetime became part of a, a Christian community or a church, or
Hmm.
never, never was able to really do that for herself. And then when she was baptized, she wrote in our church bulletin, she became baptized at my church. And she said that at that age, she had wanted to just do this for her Lord and Savior, and that she wanted to do this
Wow.
publicly in obedience. And she said that she had spent her life trying to please other people. Maybe she thought that she would ruffle some feathers if she wanted to be involved with church because my father wasn't interested, or whatnot, and that she'd always tried to be a peacemaker,
Hmm.
but that at that age she wanted to do that for herself. And interestingly, I mean, it was such a special, beautiful day, and I thought that maybe even after that her life would just be easy and beautiful and free, and that
Hmm.
would just be like a watershed moment. And interestingly, I think that her life got a little bit difficult right after that. She had had an eye surgery right before she was baptized, and in fact she was concerned that she wouldn't be able to get baptized, because it was healing, but she really wanted to be baptized and she did. But basically routine eye surgery for her resulted in some cloudiness for several months, maybe even a year. It just didn't heal up the way that they thought. And then she
Hmm.
was unable to read. She was a voracious reader. And
Yeah.
so I think that she really missed that. And then around the same time, her hearing started to decline. So I think that she felt a little bit more isolated from conversations and whatnot.
Yeah, and you know what? Sometimes, and this is important to talk about, sometimes after we receive Christ as Lord and Savior and we make that declaration, things aren't peachy keen. As a matter of fact, I received Jesus, and about a week later, my whole world fell apart. But I had somewhere to go with that. I had somewhere to
Mm.
go in that time that was so difficult. And so it really is a gift, right? God's timing is perfect. And I know that we get choice, but that he continually pursued her, so that she wouldn't be alone in some of those struggles is pretty beautiful.
It absolutely is. And even just me recounting the story kind of reveals sometimes our bad theology, that in
Hmm.
some ways I had just assumed that because in obedience she became baptized, that all of a sudden
Yeah.
there was going to be, something, things would be easier, and they're not. And so, exactly to your point, that God is with us in the hard things and in the good things. And, um,
Yeah.
just predict things.
Well, you know what, Sherry? The more that I share about him, the more platforms I'm on, the more things that I get to do, the more of a struggle it is sometimes. But you know what? I have this deep, precious, just intimate relationship with God that I don't think I would have if I didn't have to kind of live in that tension.
Hmm.
Yes, he says, like, where we're weak, he's strong, right? So that
Yes.
means we're going to be we're going to be weak somewhere, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, would you tell us who Aunt Phil was?
Yes. So my father's childhood best friend was, my uncle Don, and
Hmm.
he married Phil, and that became my Aunt Phil. And so Aunt Phil and Uncle Don and their daughters really were our family. I don't remember ever celebrating a holiday without them for my entire life. They were just my mother and Aunt Phil were like a absolute dynamic duo, always so much fun, making everything so special, just really loving all of us girls so fiercely. My Aunt Phil and Uncle Don have two daughters, and now to this day, their families are my family, and we celebrate every holiday and whatnot with them. And my Aunt Phil was just such a very special person, so much fun, but also so available, so present, always up for anything. We spent so many weekends down the shore with them, and on vacation, she always wanted to go for a bike ride, always just ready and willing to do anything that to spend time together and have fun. She was at every important event of my life, and even as an adult, she would just go out of her way to show up to anything that I was organizing or involved in at great cost and inconvenience to herself, and I realized that more as an adult
Yeah.
when you have so many responsibilities, so many people that need you, you're pulled in so many directions. But um, that was just, she was a great example and an inspiration to me. And, I really want to be that for my nieces and nephews and the people that I love. And I think that I fall short in those attempts, but it's just great to be reminded that it means something to people and that it's worth it.
It
Especially in a world that tells us to have boundaries and things. And of course we need to, and we do. But I just think seeing that example was just really impactful to me.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think that's just another one of those special people that God put in your life to show you what's important. And yeah, nobody's going to do anything perfectly. It's intention that matters. God looks at our heart and he looks at the intentions behind what we do. And that's what matters to him. Yes, sometimes we don't get it right, but if our intention is to do things, for a way that's loving and kind and pleasing to him, for other people, and we turn back to him and keep turning back, that is what he's pleased with. I remember talking to someone I was mentoring who was having trouble being quiet and still listening for God, and they were really beating themselves up. And I said, we live in a loud world. It's busy, and here's what you need to know. If the intention of your heart is you're seeking to hear God, and you get interrupted with a thought or whatever, and you stop and you redirect yourself back to him, I don't care how many times you have to do that. As long as that's what you're doing, he is well pleased. You are listening, you know?
I love that. It's so encouraging. Like you said, the intentions of our heart and just our efforts to do something. I'm on a real journey this past year. In community with 5 other friends, we started to go through this book that has excerpts of spiritual classics, and it's on all different spiritual disciplines. And so there's a big focus on prayer, contemplation, meditation, solitude, silence, things that I hadn't previously really paid attention to. And
Hmm.
that's been really, in many ways, life changing and helping to really evolve my faith journey. And just taking that time to be silent and to just make that room to hear from the Lord and to know
Yeah.
his love and to experience it. I think that, and also maybe just my personality, because I said that I am bookish. I love information. Being a lawyer, I love to read and just consume information and, have new ideas and stuff. But trying this new way of being quiet, and instead of
Hmm.
always coming to the Lord with my long lists of things that I want to talk to him about.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And spiritual disciplines like that are wonderful because they help us grow those difficult muscles of being still and listening, and it helps part of our heart grow in a new way. It's kind of like the two sides of your brain, right? Creative people use one side more than people, who are not. And there's
Mm,
different things that correlate with the different parts of your brain. And I remember at a women's retreat, I shared about Bible journaling. I draw a lot. I guess some people call me an artist, but I love to draw. And so Bible journaling is where you're taking a scripture, and some people, like I will do it right in the Bible. Other people will do it on a separate piece of paper or on the sides, but where you actually kind of pictorially draw out something that God's talking to you about. And in doing that, you're using another part of your brain while you're considering a truth of God. And it's really cool,
mm.
how you can incorporate and learn new things. So I would say if you want to add to that list, try drawing some things out. Whether you do stick people or whether you can draw, it doesn't matter to anybody. But let God help you kind of really open your horizons, because it sounds like that's what you're doing. And the more stuff like that you do, all of us, anyone listening out there, this is for all of us. The more time that we offer up to God instead of our computers, our phones,
Mm-hmm.
our televisions,
Mm-hmm.
the more time that we give him, the more time that we get to know him, and the more depth we're going to have in that relationship. And I'm telling you, there is nothing more precious than that. You're not going to get to the end of your life and wish that you spent more time on your phone. You're going to get to the end of your life and wish you spent more time with God.
Absolutely. And I definitely agree. Exercising that creative part of our brain, even if we don't consider ourselves a creative, maybe that's even more reason to exercise that. And um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and just using our imagination when we're reading scriptures to really slow down and try to picture the scene and use our
Mhm.
senses. And I think that that's really powerful. And we'll get some more insights than just studying the scriptures, even though, of course, that's so useful, valuable, and important. But it's almost countercultural to be a little bit more creative.
Yeah, it reminds me often of worship time, right? When I'm
Hmm.
worshiping God, I'm so focused on him that everything else falls away so quickly. And I think when we get a little bit using the creative part of our brain, that happens too.
Yes, yes, I agree.
Now, you had told me that your neighbor's family was very involved in church. They invited you to VBS and events. What were the types of things that you learned? How did you said you had a faith of your own very young. How did you get to that point?
I think that it was through just hearing the gospel at that little church and knowing that I was loved and learning about God at a young age. And then I also think because I wasn't from, say, a traditional church family where my family was so involved, I never struggled with what, I hear other people maybe struggle with making faith their own and not
Hmm.
having it be just the tradition or the culture of their family. I, from an early age, was drawn to that and embraced that. I think that, um, I think that I had a saving knowledge of the Lord, but I didn't have a fully surrendered heart in life. And that came much later. I remember praying often, maybe through my teenage years, Lord, help me to want you more. I knew that
Mm.
maybe there was something like missing a little bit. And He did answer that prayer, years later, and in kind of a dramatic way, to the point where I really do feel now a much more surrendered,
Hmm. Hmm.
surrendered heart towards him. And it's interesting because I've heard other people describe experiences similar to that, even people in the mission field. So it's
Absolutely.
interesting,
Yeah.
our faith journeys.
Yeah, and it's true. You know what? It's again, you have a desire, but we're living in this tension between the flesh and the spirit, and things in our mind and things in our heart, and God understands that, and he's so sweet and so gentle, and he knows what will overwhelm us, and he goes one step at a time,
Hmm.
one layer at a time, and consistently continues um to just be there. And every time he sees or hears somebody say, "Hey, I need help with this," I just picture him just jumping up off his throne, and feeling like,
Hmm.
okay, now that's my kind of gal, right? I'm coming, daughter. I've got you.
Hmm.
And I think it's just so beautiful how he's just listening for that. The word says that his eyes look to and fro, looking for someone whom he might use, somebody who's paying attention to him. And
Hmm.
you look at all of the different stories in the Bible, and there were people selected. Those people had a heart that was open to him, and a lot of times they grew up in a different culture.
Hmm.
So I think it's beautiful that it doesn't matter whether you're a Jew or a Gentile, a man or a woman, a child or an older person. You're God's child, and he loves you, and he's just waiting to hear from you.
Yes, yes, it is beautiful.
Now, you told me something I thought was pretty powerful. You said that even as a teen, you would meet people at that church and find out that they had been praying for you. That's amazing. How did that make you feel?
It surprised me and I really couldn't believe it. And I just felt so honored and so grateful. And then I saw that God answers those prayers, that through my life, He's answered those prayers of those people who prayed for me as a child. And I believe that that taught me to pray for people. And I
Hmm.
had another experience too as an adult. I was just involved in women's ministry at my church. And um, there was an elderly woman at my church. She had been a missionary for years, and they were now retired missionaries. And I had heard of her, but the first time that I met her, when I was introduced, she said, "Oh, Sherri DeWalt, I've been praying for you." And I
Wow.
just also, in the same way, I was just so surprised, and I couldn't believe that, someone would pray for a stranger like that.
Hmm.
And it was just so powerful to me. And it just actually created such a great bond for me with her. And,
Yeah.
was able to kind of like nurture that relationship with her through the years.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful when you are the one praying for someone you don't know or you don't know that well.
Hmm.
And it's beautiful when you find out others have been praying for you. It really is one body. We are meant to be one body of Christ. We are meant to be a family. We are meant to be constantly interacting with one another. And oftentimes that is through prayer. And honestly, the prayers that no one knows about are just as powerful, if
Hmm.
not more powerful
Hmm.
than those that everybody knows because you're sitting in a prayer circle and you're saying it out loud. And I think that the time that you spend quietly lifting someone else up, it's a humble place to be where you're saying, I don't want to take up your time with anything for me right now, God. I want you to look at this. And it's really a way of honoring somebody that's so powerful.
It is really amazing and such a tremendous gift and so powerful. And people who do devote their lives to intercessory prayer. I have so many examples of people like that. And in my life, there were many older women at my church who, as a young mom, they would come up to me and ask me about my children and say that they were praying about them. There's even an older saint who is now with the Lord, who the Lord put on her heart. My own father, and she would often come up to me and ask me about my father, and
Mm.
it's just absolutely amazing. And there's such a powerful core group of women at my church who prayed for my church through the years. And I just know that God heard and answered those prayers. And, I believe that the good work that's being done and the continuation of the work and whatnot is a lot of answered prayers.
Absolutely. Now, you went on to go to school at the University of Penn. Can you tell us what you went to school for?
Yes, I studied international relations, which was basically economics, history, and political science. I love that. And then that was in the College of Arts and Sciences. And then by my senior year, I decided to get a dual degree. So I studied international business at the Wharton School of Business.
Hmm.
And then I went on from there. I went to Temple Law School. And when I originally went, I thought that I would go into international business. But my heart changed and my direction changed at some point, I would say through a combination of being in law school and then maybe even at some of the law firms that I worked at when I graduated. But um, I, Temple is really known for their trial advocacy program. And so I got
Hmm.
involved in that. And then I had internships at a legal aid clinic and then also at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. And I think that that really started, um, it just kind of showed me that I love knowing an individual and like hearing their story and advocating for justice. So I think that that maybe started my path away from maybe a more corporate focus or a
Hmm.
more global focus to really the story of an individual. Um, and when I graduated from law school, I actually went to work at a large law firm in Philadelphia. But then my husband and I moved to Minnesota. And when I moved there, I really just wanted to make a switch. And I realized that I didn't want to work at a large law firm. And I really just wanted to work, um, to have a job where I was in court and working with people. So I started to work for a judge as a law clerk. And I really love that. I love that the real, raw, lives that were being impacted, and every
Hmm.
day hearing the stories of so many different people. And and I worked for a wonderful judge, and it was just great. And then after that, I saw that I decided that I wanted to be a public defender because I wanted to defend at the time that I started it, I wanted to defend children because I had just seen a lot of children come into court, and a lot of the cases would be resolved without trials or without much advocacy. And I really just wanted to advocate for those
Yeah.
children.
Yeah, I mean, here God's writing your story again. I hear this strong sense of advocacy and justice, but I also see this very personal part of you, the one that loves to be hospitable, the one that loves to know someone's story. Hospitality is a spiritual gift, and making people feel comfortable, giving them full attention without your own agenda, is really something special. People don't do that nowadays. A lot of people listen, just waiting for their turn to speak. And I've learned a lot from doing this podcast, especially during the whole process, because there's a pre-recording call as well, in connecting with people and really leaning in to their story. I'm not thinking about my story, and so that's been a gift from God that was unexpected, but I know he uses it now in other ministries. And so I see that he's just laying all this groundwork for you, and he's allowing the things that you're passionate about to really start to bloom, because they're going to be the things he uses for his kingdom.
Yeah, it is amazing. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's very cool. I always say God just writes the best stories. I love going back, because when we look at the backstory, it helps us understand the present and understand too what we're longing for the future and where it came from.
Yeah, I just hadn't given it a lot of thought until I met you and in talking with you and even preparing to do this podcast. And so I'm much more interested in it. And I really do want to be a better listener to people's stories. And I do want to encourage them to see how God is working and moving in their entire lives. I do have a friend who always says, God doesn't waste anything. And you can
That's
definitely
right.
see that at work. When you take the time to look back over your life and just see all the ways that he's working and moving. And like you said, how he's using the people that he put into your lives and the experiences and building
hmm
upon everything if you let him.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things to do is actually, especially with people who say, "Well, I don't have a story." I'm like, "Yes, you do. Everyone has a story." Is help ask pivotal questions to pull the story out. It's a really neat process, that I'm beginning to see that there's such value in, because all of us that are Christians need to share our story. God tells us that our story is a way that we can reach people for him, and everybody's story reaches different people. So if you're not sharing your story, there's holes in this gospel net that's supposed to cast everywhere.
Absolutely. And that's, God's telling the story of so many individuals in the Bible. And that's so
hmm
much of the power of the Bible because we see ourselves in those imperfect people.
That's right. That's right. Thank goodness they're in there, right?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So you did mention your husband. We kind of skipped over how you met him, but can you just tell us a little bit about what he's like?
Yes, he is just absolutely a rock of a person, a steady Eddie, unflappable. And I really think that that's what largely attracted me to him. I guess he's someone that counterbalances some of my energy and some of my, I can always be like, what's new and next, and, racing
hmm
off into some direction. And so he has an incredible way of supporting me and allowing me to fly, but also grounding me.
Yeah, I was like picturing like an anchor with a kite attached to it.
I love it.
Now, you also have two children. What's motherhood like for you?
Yes, it's honestly the joy of my life. It's I experience motherhood in a very primal way, just really just a ferocious love for my two children. Almost surprised by that when my son was born. It was unexpected to me that I think I just hadn't considered or realized how life changing and how much love you could have for a child.
Yeah.
And I guess I shouldn't be surprised because I had described my mother's love for me in those
Yeah.
terms, and like you said, God's love for us in those terms. So um, I just absolutely love being a mom, and just so blessed by my children. And all that said, though, I will mention that when my children were young, I had been a public defender for several years in Minnesota, and then we made the move back to Philadelphia. And because of my husband's job and he was traveling so much, I made this decision to stay home with the kids. And I knew absolutely without any shadow of a doubt that that was the right decision for my family. But I did struggle with that and kind of entered in a season of depression and just I think because for so many years I had found my identity in my work or my role or
Yeah.
what I was accomplishing or doing. So
Mhm.
there was definitely a season of working that out. And it's something that I've struggled with, I'd say even to this day, or maybe again or again, I had another season of really struggling with it. I guess when my children graduated from high school, and then we were going to enter this empty nest stage. And I thought, oh, this is my time again now to go back to work. So
Yeah.
I experimented and, tried out several different roles and just ultimately really did believe that there was a calling on my life towards women's ministry and finally surrendered to that. And I'm so happy about that, but I guess I just, bring it up to say that that's been something that I constantly have to be aware of, that I
Yeah.
contend towards trying to find my value or my worth in what I'm accomplishing.
Well, Sherry, we all wrestle with God over different things, but the cool thing about wrestling with God is you wrestle with God and he gives you a new name, right? He
Mhm.
sends you in a direction as your character grows from the wrestling, right? And you might walk away with a little bit of a limp,
Yeah.
but but you walk away with a new name and with a new purpose. And so I feel like God is certainly big enough for us to wrestle out those things, but he teaches us in it and he creates a new part of our character for what he has for us to do. So I think he uses those as pivotal moments for growth.
Yes, and it is so humbling, but also exciting because he is working and moving in such remarkable ways in our lives and in the world. And sometimes just recognizing that he's the one that's doing all of those things and just he's
Yeah,
allowing us to be part of it, and he's doing that in a way that is really joyful for us. So I'm
yeah.
just really grateful even for all of that journey. And sometimes you just wish that things don't take as much time, that you could just learn things quicker, but he's
Yeah,
so good.
he is. He is. Now, will you tell us about that ministry? Tell us about Rookery Resources. How did it kind of come to be? What is it doing now? How is it growing? What are your plans?
Yes, thank you. So, a few years ago, I did become convicted of a real need in my own life, and I believe in the lives of others, for connection, investing in friendship, having fun, being creative, and strengthening faith. So, I invited a few neighbors and friends, and we started a small group in my home called a Huddle. And we meet twice a month, and each meeting is different, and we do a variety of things from creative projects to going on excursions, like going for a hike or even just meeting at a restaurant or a museum. And then I guess the most important thing that we do, though, is share a meal together and have more directed conversations. So we'll talk about a variety of topics, everything from things that are going on in the world to just exploring things like awe or gratitude. And basically, trying to get to know each other. I always create, some content for the groups, which involves questions to get to know people so that we can kind of move past just small talk and
Hmm.
really, find out what's going on in people's lives and just and also point each other towards the Lord and encourage each other in our faith. And the group is very diverse with people of different denominations and on different places in their faith journey, but it's basically we're trying to strengthen faith on that foundation of friendship, knowing people, loving
Hmm.
them, being known and being loved, and experiencing life. And then through that, we're pointing each other to the Lord and to His strength and to the joy in living, for Him.
Yeah, and what I love about what you're doing is the people that you're getting together, you could easily have someone who doesn't go to church, who lives in your neighborhood or is someone's friend, and they could come along and it would be kind of an organic way for them to begin to understand what is a Christian really? What is this
Mhm.
Lord they're talking about? How does he change their life? What is this hope or peace or this just vibrant love that I see? And it's not so much like you're going to a Bible study, you have to, do this, do that way, this tradition, that tradition. It's more about relationship and real connection and community. And community is part of biblical life.
Yeah, absolutely. I do believe that, churches are obviously doing this and doing it well, but
Hmm.
often what's offered at church is just very traditional Bible study, which is
Yeah.
fabulous. And we all need that, and we all need to grow and be discipled. Um,
Hmm.
but I almost see this as something, like you said, more organic, more just knowing and loving people that we're called to do, to love our neighbors as ourselves. And we can't love people unless we know them, and we can't know them unless we're spending time with them and making memories with them, and
Hmm.
doing things. And there's great value in that, in and of itself. I think that we're created for that type of community. I think that Jesus modeled that type of community. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
just it's just been a tremendous blessing and just a great joy to do it.
Yeah, it's way less of a program and more
Yes.
of a let's live life together. And, for me, that's what community has always been in my small groups. It's that, we would do things together. You'd go to the
Hmm.
gym together, you go to the food
Hmm.
store together, I mentored a lot of young ladies that way where it wasn't all sitting down in front of the Bible
Hmm.
or worship, but when you get to really know one another, then you start to be able to tell little bits of your story. And as you
Hmm.
do, I always say it's like popcorn popping. One person's brave and they share a little bit. And the next thing you know, everyone feels comfortable to be vulnerable. And that can only happen once you know each other. It doesn't happen with complete strangers.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, how many groups do you have right now? And I also want to mention, like, so you've made these resources for each new group. You've really put this in such a way that I've been talking with you about, hey, this should be something that perhaps goes a step further as far as who you might be able to give it to. So let's start with how many groups do you currently have now? And then could you tell us a little bit about the resources you've created? A simple example, and then maybe what you're thinking about doing with them.
Yes, thank you. We have three groups that are meeting right now, and do have some interest in other groups forming in September. Basically, we kind of structure the curriculum. It's not really curriculum, just the content and the ideas, so that the groups meet September, October, November, and then again for 3 months, January, February, March. Take a bit of a break in the summer. Try to create the content in such a way that it's really manageable. If someone wants to start a group, it involves a total of 6 meetings in each of those, more or less, like semesters.
Hmm.
And one of the meetings is an excursion, so that's not in the home, and then the other ones are in the home. But I've created a handbook where I literally am detailing, the suggested menu, because it's not rocket science by any stretch. And I know that anyone could do all of these things, but it does take time to think it through and to just, come up with the questions and the conversations and the fun ideas. So I wanted to, kind of put that all out there so that if someone is interested in doing it, it would be as easy as possible for them to just launch and to start having fun. Um, yeah, I know that people are really busy, and I think that I think a lot of people really want to do something like this with their friends and neighbors, but they don't really know where to start.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so we created the content just to make it as easy as possible for anyone who would like to start a group. I think that a lot of people have a desire to do something like this, but they don't really know where to start. So, created this handbook that includes the menu suggestions, the questions, the topics for conversation, video clips that the groups can watch together and then discuss, and ideas, as well as detailed instructions for all of the crafts and whatnot. We tend to have seasonal crafts. So around Christmas time, we've made wreaths or small little like Christmas scenes, or we're going to try to do a crutch this year.
Awesome. I love
Yeah,
that.
and at Easter time this year, we tried pasanki, which is the traditional
I've
Ukrainian egg
done
decorating.
that. I've done that. That's difficult, but really cool.
Yes, yes. So we have so much fun and it just keeps it really fresh and really fun. We just do icebreakers and very often we'll have little welcome gifts or we'll have a little game where a gift's involved and it's just fun and ladies love gifts and crafts and
Yeah.
excursions. So it's really just about having fun together, getting to know each other and like I said, pointing each other towards the Lord,
Yeah.
and living, hoping to live life together and to making those connections outside of the group.
Yeah, and I love that you've made this resource so that anyone can do it because there are people who maybe aren't quite as outgoing or they don't have as much time or they don't have the ability to think through all of the moving pieces. So you've made it really simple. It kind of reminds me of when somebody isn't used to leading a group discussion and you give them all of the questions, basically they're just facilitating and then allowing naturally and organically for all of the good stuff to happen. So I think that's great. I also made a little note here when you said it's not rocket science. I literally interviewed someone yesterday whose husband is a rocket scientist,
Wow.
and she was telling me how her kids, that's like the running joke. It's not rocket science, mom, like because and I was like, oh my gosh, really? I didn't think anybody really was a rocket scientist.
Exactly. Oh, that's so funny.
I think that's really awesome. And we had even talked about maybe in the future wanting to do some retreats for the leaders of these groups as they grow, and maybe eventually a retreat for all of the ladies, which is really exciting. I think that's really exciting. I can just see all of the pieces coming off of this kind of hub idea.
Yes, I would absolutely love that. And another big part of something that I want to really develop is I want to be supporting and providing community for the people who are running huddles, basically the huddle keepers, and uh, providing ideas for books to read and even just being able to talk it through and share ideas and just share community because we
Yeah.
never want to be serving just out on our own in some kind of island. And I always see this as something that is, that you're doing in partnership with the local church. And as
Hmm.
people, you're getting to know them and you're nurturing them on their faith journey, then point them to the local church for more in depth Bible study, for, just learning and growing and being fed.
Yeah, absolutely. And, being a leader is pouring out, even if some of the ideas are provided for you, you're still pouring out. And so it's
Hmm.
important to connect with other people who are pouring out and be poured into. I think that's great. And then I have one more question for you. I always end every podcast with it. It's my favorite question. I just love all the different possibilities of the answers. If you could go back and give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
Yeah, well, I just really love that. I probably was too thick-headed to take any advice at that time. So I think I'd need much more of like a sit down and a knock on the head. But I guess that really this idea of that we can trust God to surrender to Him, that
Hmm.
um, I think that I wrestled with relationships and career decisions and things like that, and I didn't understand that if I just started that conversation with God, that he would enter in and he would so faithfully and gently lead, guide, and direct, and
Yeah.
that I could trust him for that. I think that I just always had this sense that I needed to make the right decision, I needed to figure the thing out, I needed to do the right thing, and I think that I just did not have that understanding that God knew me even in my weakness, and he knew my desires, and he knows what's best, and that I guess most of all that he can make a way. First of all, the Bible says beyond what we can ask or imagine.
Hmm.
um, and I think that I just did not have that understanding of that he could work it out. I just saw it as so black and white that,
Yeah.
well, maybe I needed to make this choice, to be pleasing to God or whatnot. And I didn't understand that I could invite him in to talk to him about it, and then to pause and to wait and to see how he would work and move in my life and in the circumstances. So yeah, like it's what I want to know more of now. It's what I would want all of your listeners to know. It's what I would
Hmm.
want everyone that I love and that I know to know. Um, and I guess it's something that sometimes we just can't hear it to know, but
Yeah.
just getting started with the Lord and knowing Him better, He'll do that work in our hearts over time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He wants to do everything with us. I think that's very wise advice. I also wanted to just mention that we're going to be putting in the show notes all of the links to all the resources and the different places where you can follow Sherri and see what she's doing. I know that this is going to continue growing. I can just see it. It just makes a lot of sense. You have boiled down one of the primary needs of being a human, and done it in a way that you're helping anyone be able to carry out the connection that God desires for us. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate the opportunity to share, and I absolutely invite and welcome anyone to reach out. And if anyone's interested in starting a group in their neighborhood or with their friends, I'd love to come alongside of them and support them in any way, whether it's doing a huddle in the way that I've done it, or if it's just even doing like a one and done event at their home where they're inviting people to come and to do a craft or to have a conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm just looking forward to like our friendship because you're local to me, and so we've gotten to know each other and get together, and we have another planned play date to get together and talk about all the fun things that God has on our hearts. And so, I absolutely know we were meant to know one another because we have just very similar desires for women's ministry, and for just people in general. I'm just so glad to know you and grateful that you took some time to share your story.
Oh, same, Amanda. Thank you so much. I just also so appreciate your heart and everything that you're doing, and just your energy and your sense of fun, and just the way that you see God working and moving in the smallest things and the biggest things. And just so blessed to get to know you better. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you too.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one thing to be thankful for. You know, if you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.